Welcome to the Safety Map podcast. I'm Alyssa Decker, founder and developer of the Safety Map framework, and this is where we talk about how safety, not performance, is the foundation of healing. We're talking about healing that goes beyond coping skills and into structural change. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Safety Map podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker. Today we're talking about shame. None of us like to talk about shame, but all of us experience shame. Now, most of us have been taught that shame is something to get rid of. And that makes perfect sense, actually, because shame doesn't feel very good. Shame actually feels quite uncomfortable in our bodies. And so we have a tendency to want to escape that shame or correct that shame or remove that shame somehow. But have you ever stopped to think about what shame is actually doing? What purpose, what role is it filling in your body? Why does your body summon shame? Why does it bring shame up at seemingly the most inconvenient times? Shame is not a problem. Shame is the guard. Shame activates in your body, or rather your system activates shame as the guard to protect you. And by the way, every time I use that phrase, shame guard, in voice to text on my phone, it autocorrects to Seamus. And I think that's really funny because it brings to mind this picture of an Irish bouncer standing outside a pub, deciding who gets to come in, who has to leave. And that's kind of actually how shame works in your body. Shame is there to control access. It is there to prevent unsafe exposure for your system. So when something happens, like we speak up and we get shut down, or we express something important to us and we're rejected, or we take a chance on a situation or a relationship and we are embarrassed as a result of that, shame is what steps in and says, oh no, we're not doing that again. And so when you recall that experience, or when you encounter a similar experience, you have an opportunity to do the same thing again, shame will come up. It will remind you, sometimes quite loudly, that what we did before led to something that wasn't safe to our connections or our identity. And it uses that response, that discomfort in the body that we all feel when we feel shame. For me, my face flushes, my palms get sweaty. I tend to feel an urge to withdraw or to go hide when I feel shame. It uses those sensations to keep us from doing that thing again. It's protecting me in those instances from repeat exposure to something that was painful or dangerous. Now, if you've ever been to therapy, or if you've ever had a really traumatic experience that you were trying to heal from and you found yourself encountering shame along the way, it's easy to feel like shame is in the way. Shame is a problem, that it keeps us stuck, and that shame is anti-healing. Sometimes we think, if I could just get over this shame, then I could heal. But shame is not anti-healing. Your shame is anti-unsafe access. And so when we feel like shame is getting in the way and blocking our healing or blocking our connections, it's because there is still something, some threat that your safety map is detecting, and shame is stepping in to say, this access is not yet safe enough to allow. This access re-exposes us to a threat. And when your system no longer detects threat, when your system detects safety and feels safe, shame steps aside. Shame allows healing and connection and pattern changing to happen when it detects that it is safe enough to do so. If you have been following me here for a little while on this podcast, if you're enjoying the content or you're learning something, or even just identifying and you think other people might benefit too, I would love for you to take a moment and subscribe, like this video, share it with a friend or two. It would really help get the word out about the Safety Map podcast. So thank you in advance for doing that. Now, shame has many tactics. It can be rather sneaky, and it can also be rather obnoxiously loud. Shame can look like deflection or over-explaining or minimizing or withdrawing. Shame can also look like explosive anger. It can look like dismissing someone else. It can look like making excuses or rationalizing away certain behaviors. And whatever behavior we exhibit when we're feeling shame, that behavior is an attempt to protect us. One of the places that this is most misunderstood is when shame activates something like anger. If someone is yelling at me, screaming in my face, it's highly unlikely that the first thought that comes to my mind is, oh, they must be feeling shame right now, right? I'm probably thinking something more along the lines of, would you just get out of my face, right? In fact, their yelling might activate my shame as a defense to the onslaught of their words, as a protective mechanism to keep me from maybe saying something that might further damage the connection. But when shame uses a big response like anger, what it's really saying is, let's look anywhere but this thing that feels unsafe to expose. Let's look at anything else. I will use any means necessary to distract you from this painful area, this rupture in my safety map that I do not want you to see, because access to that area is unsafe. And so oftentimes these big reactions, like anger, come from a root of shame. They come from blocking the other person from seeing what the system is not willing to show or to expose. And by yelling or screaming, what often happens is the other person retreats, right? Which is exactly the point. That's exactly why shame chose that response. In the last episode, we talked about how your body detects threat and how when it uses a protective response, it will continue to use that response if it is effective. And if it's not effective, it will escalate to a stronger, more forceful response. Your body's always asking, what level of reaction is necessary to keep me safe in this moment? When your body escalates the threat response, shame often escalates accordingly because shame is protective. And so we get into these patterns sometimes, these cycles, where our body detects a threat in a certain relationship, a certain connection, a certain area. Shame works to make us withdraw, to help us keep our mouths shut, to keep us from exposing intimate personal details to another person. And so our body employs shame again because it was effective. It worked. These are not random behaviors These are controlled access. This is your body saying, these things here are safe to reveal, and these things are not. So if we go there, if you tiptoe into that territory, I will activate shame to keep you from exposing anything that might not be safe to expose or to share with another person. Here's something I notice that's really interesting in sessions with clients. Oftentimes, when their shame activates, sometimes shame says, we can talk about anything else as long as we don't talk about this one thing. Shame will even say, we can talk about me. In other words, we can talk about why I feel shame. We can talk about strategies to try to reduce shame. We can talk about how to soothe shame. We can talk about how uncomfortable shame is. As long as we don't look behind the curtain, as long as we don't talk about the thing that shame is defending. It's very easy, especially when we view shame as the problem, to keep talking about our shame and talking about our shame and talking about our shame, trying to calm it, trying to soothe it, and never actually get to the thing behind shame. That's why shame is such an effective guard. When that happens, maybe you've been in therapy and you have been in sessions where you've talked about your shame over and over and over again and nothing ever shifts. It's because you're talking about the guard and not about what he is protecting. And you know what? When we talk about shame, when we address shame directly, when we listen to it, when we acknowledge it, it will often soften. The response in your body will often settle a little bit. In other words, you'll feel better. Even though shame is still present, you'll start to feel better. It will be less intense. Shame will soften for attention. But shame only steps aside for safety. Imagine that you had a guard at the gate of your beautiful walled city, deciding who got to come in and who doesn't. Shame is not fooled. It will stand at the gate and talk to a visitor, someone approaching, all day long. But it will only open the gate and step aside if it deems access to be safe. So if shame is showing up in your life, if it's showing up in your body, if it's showing up in relationships that you have, even if it feels like it's interfering, even if it feels like it's problematic, I want to invite you to begin to recognize shame as one of the ways, one of the strategies that your body is employing to protect you. Shame is not showing up because something is wrong with you. It is showing up to protect you. It's showing up because something doesn't feel safe enough yet. So the question is not, how do I get rid of shame? The question is not, how do I stop feeling ashamed? The question is, what is shame protecting me from? And how do I create enough safety that shame is no longer necessary? How do I create enough safety that whatever shame is protecting can be repaired? That is where we get into structural healing. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how your system repairs. And this is my favorite thing to talk about, because so often we feel like we are stuck, like we are trapped in our patterns, we're stuck in our trauma. We can manage our symptoms or the way that trauma shows up in our lives, but nothing ever seems to really heal on a structural level. It just keeps coming back. It doesn't have to be that way. Repair is possible, and that's what we're going to talk about in the next episode. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, if this is resonating with you, I want to invite you to download something that I've just recently put together. It's a free PDF, and it's called Calm is Not the Same as Safety. And inside that PDF, I'm breaking down what safety feels like in your body, what calm feels like in your body, and how sometimes those two things do not go together. They don't always go hand in hand. And I'm also answering the question, how is it that sometimes my body can feel calm even when I'm not safe? So if you've ever struggled with calming your body, staying calm, not understanding the difference between calm and safety, any of those things, this PDF is for you. The link to download it is in the show notes. So go and grab that, and I'll see you in the next episode.